And we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for our second Skills Academy workshop series. We're super excited for today's workshops. We have Brands, Business, and BS with BradleyBrands, who's joining us today. So thank you so much for joining and educating us all on the magic of branding.
This year, these are the three organizations that we're working with throughout the program. So we just want to take this chance in a second to thank all of our sponsors for this year and for this Externship Academy. We are really thankful for you, and we're happy that we can be of service to you in this process.
This program is actually brought to you by our American Marketing Association San Francisco chapter's Externship Academy. And so if you're not familiar with the Academy, we are a program that it is created to provide small businesses and organizations with marketing related assistance with externs and young marketing professionals and graduate students who, in a sense, act as marketing consultants. So we have a team of externs who volunteer their time and they get real hands-on experience in the marketing realm while also helping a business based here in the Bay Area. So the three businesses that Kushi had just mentioned in the last slide, those are the three businesses that we are supporting in the 2023 year.
And this is our cohort for the year. So these are some of the beautiful faces that are working with not only us, with each other, and for these organizations that we mentioned previously. And of course, Elizabeth and myself as just support and staff and able to help them with whatever they need. But these are the stars of the program.
In addition to what we're doing here with the Externship Academy, if you're interested in getting involved in any way with the Externship Academy in the future, you can reach out to myself or Kushi or fill out an interest form on the AMA San Francisco website. We do have some other exciting events going on that we'd love for you to participate. The first one is a Spring into Networking event that's going to be taking place in downtown San Francisco that's open to members and non-members. And you can feel free to bring your marketing colleagues. It's going to be at Persona, which is a lovely lounge where we'll be kind of connecting and networking with those within the Bay Area. We also have two more Skills Academy workshops coming up within our series. Both are going to be virtual and online. One is featuring Eric, who's going to be covering all things web design. And also one is going to be with Thomas, who's going to be covering social media marketing as well as paid media. And you can register for these on the AMA San Francisco.org website. Registration is required to participate.
And now we would like to introduce Brad and let him take it off. He is our brand specialist and expert, and he will be providing you with all the information in today's workshop. He aims to introduce marketers to that core concept of how a strategy and a brand strategy will strengthen their careers as a marketer. He has a lot of great content for us today, so we're really excited for this workshop, and we hope you all enjoy it. And Brad, you can take it away.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for the lovely intro. And I apologize, I don't look like my AI driven picture because I shaved my beard. So let me bring up this deck. I realize I haven't allowed Zoom the privacy access yet. 1 second.
In the meantime, just a note, feel free at any time. This is a super interactive workshop that Brad has created. So feel free at any time to send any questions in the chat or unmute, ask anything. It's designed to be interactive. So feel free to do so. And if you would like, you can turn your camera on as well and participate in real life, kind of.
All right, are we up? Can you guys see everything?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming today. This is my first real presentation outside of an organization in terms of places that I've worked and discussing uh, some of the ideas around branding, a big top level view about it, and kind of just discussing what this endlessly evolving world of business brand, how it's connected, and hopefully in the future, a little bit of the bullshit. So, um, to kind of kick this off, I like to speak with a very curious mind, and I don't ever want to consider myself to be an expert in something. I really want to drive home this point that, there's something beautiful about the fluidity of strategy and theories and discussions and being curious and, being able to look at these things as complex puzzles that require brilliant solutions, and those solutions are always adapting and always changing. This is the beautiful thing about what it is that we do, and the beautiful thing about marketing and branding in general. So don't let any of this stuff scare you. I mean, a lot of this is just to kind of create a basic understanding. The rabbit hole goes very deep, and I want to make sure that, I at least inspire you enough to start to go down that rabbit hole in this discussion. And I know that you're all here for different reasons, but this one truth exists, that we're all curious, and we're curious about these puzzles. We're curious about how to discover these solutions. And just like in business, you're curious as to where you as a marketer or a creative or an entrepreneur fit into this equation. And that's why I'm here, to be a conduit for your potential as a marketer, to give you some unique insights and tools and thought points around discussions in order to help you become a better partner with the businesses that you deal with, but also to become an invaluable asset to them. We're going to start off just kind of a quick overview about myself. So, I was a former professional athlete up until my mid 20s. I played water polo. And after that, I spent a little bit of a time at this company called Jinx, and we did mass market retail goods we did mass market licensed apparel for massive video game organizations. So Minecraft, Blizzard, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, all these really big properties. And that was kind of my first foray into the intuitive process of brand and brand strategy, but in the backseat as an illustrator and a creative. After Jinx, I came up to the Bay Area and I started working at a company called MasterClass, which I'm sure a lot of you, especially in the area, may have heard of. It was the online educational platform when we were pretty famous for doing classes with celebrities. And my current role is I'm a co-founder and the chief brand officer at a company called Hype, and it is a an athlete focused network. So it's kind of like a LinkedIn for athletes. Um, when I going back a little bit, when I was finishing my career as an athlete, I had a very big loss of identity. I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. Um, I didn't have a lot of direction. I didn't have a lot of mentors. I didn't have any mentors, in fact, beyond my parents who just kept reiterating that I'll figure things out. And so we had this very fortunate day when I was taking a web design class, and it was, I think, maybe Photoshop 5 or 6 at that time. And it was at a junior college. And we had these professionals come into the class to start talking about things that they do and businesses and kind of like what I'm doing right now and what the other instructors do. And the guy that came into my class that day, there were 6 of us in the class. That guy was Ken Block. And if you don't know who Ken Block is, he started DC Shoes. He then sold that and moved on to Hoonigan and did rallycross driving and became very well known within that sport. It did Gymkhana series. And unfortunately, he recently just passed away about 2 months ago. And there came a very pivotal moment in my life where I suddenly got a little bit of a direction, a little bit of kick in the ass from who I consider to be my hero. And that moment for me kickstarted my path. The next day I went out and bought a screen printing press. I learned how to design. I started learning about businesses. I had a failed business. I went and worked at Jinx and then MasterClass. And so this initial conversation, uh, on top of being extremely curious about everything, kickstarted my journey as a creative and as a strategist. So this this path through these past couple companies has kind of strengthened these 2 questions I've always had about the industry, right? Why do consumers do what they do? And why do businesses do what they do? Right? Why, when I was at Jinx, why did consumers really like a specific type of t-shirt design versus the other ones? Why at Masterclass did we do some ad campaigns during these time periods and these ones during different time periods? And so as a creative and dealing with a lot of the assets that would go out into the world, there's always that like deep down desire that I had to really understand this entire landscape of things. And this is what led me into what I now dive into on a daily basis, which is brand strategy. And uh, we're going to start out with a very, very high level view. And these are just brand fundamentals. There's conversations that can happen in each of these sections that are going to come up that can last for 2 to 3 hours. And there's experts on all of these things, and we'll kind of dive into each of those pieces. So in order to start out, we're going to get into breakout rooms. And I want you to think about what your definition of a brand is. So don't look anything up. I want you to kind of give me an explanation of it as you currently understand it or how you think about it. And then we'll come back after about 5 to 10 minutes and we'll discuss that.
Opening those up now.
Thank you.
One sec. Oh, give me 1 second. It's making me restart. start them for some reason.
What happened?
I think you should be able to join now.
We were already talking about it.
Asking me to join a different room.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
then what happened?
I think it came up and I guess some people didn't click on it, and then I think you closed it and redid it, so then they got kicked out. People that did click on it. It's fine.
I should have.
We still just see like loading on your screen.
Oh,
So maybe, yeah, reshare. Perfect.
we good? Okay. All right. Do we have everybody back in?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. So I'm gonna pick a few brave souls, and I would love to hear what your definition is. Oops. Trying to get the big view of everybody, but it's not popping up. All right. Karina, would you like to go?
Yes. I just joined in, so I completely missed that.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry about that.
Do you have a definition off the top of your head of what a brand is?
Um, um, basically in the identity of a company.
Great answer. Great answer. Thomas.
Yeah, I think similar to what you said, it's it's either the products, like service, or even your personal identity, or what that connection point with that entity.
Very good, very good. Amanda.
I was actually in Thomas's group, but we did talk about one word that came to mind was experience, and kind of how your audience interacts with either you or your brand or organization.
Beautiful. And last one, we'll go with Tiffany.
To me, branding is like a company or like a product that like has like a design that like differentiates it from like other companies.
These are all really good answers, and they're all correct. Here are a couple expert definitions of how they view brand. A brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one service or product over another. That's by Seth Godin, who's a godfather of marketing. And A brand is the intangible sum of a product's attributes, its name, packaging, price, its history, its reputation, and the way it's advertised. That's from David Ogilvy. Marty Neumeyer says that it's the sum total of everything a company does, its products, services, advertising, customer service, and even the behavior of its employees. Jeff Bezos says that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And lastly, Chris Anderson says a brand is the sum total of how someone perceives our particular organization. So a lot of you are kind of you're definitely in the right realm. So the way that I think about it, and I try to boil things down, even though this isn't a simple topic, I try to boil it down even farther. And to me, a brand is a business's way. Sorry, a brand is a business's always evolving consumer-facing identity, and it's how you show up in this world. So for this next part, what is brand strategy? And we're going to break into another subset of rooms, and then I want you to kind of come up with some additional answers around what brand strategy is and how that differs from brand. Oops. I didn't mean to leave.
No worries.
Were there any questions popping up in the chat?
No,
No,
nothing
just
at the
some
moment.
comments.
Yeah. Someone said that they thought that branding also plays out in how employees function as the brand ambassadors based on their behavior. But yeah, just comments. No questions yet.
Feel like we're doing pretty good on time as well. So
Totally. What do you guys think? Should I close the rooms? I
Yeah.
think so.
yeah.
I feel like people discuss really quickly nowadays.
I agree.
Are we all back?
Halfway. We have one more room that hasn't cleared out yet. Good to go.
All right. I'm going to pick on a few more of you. Let's start with Eric.
Oh, golly. We were just, I was just sucking all the air out of the room in our little chat room. So I've been in brand strategy projects, and it's depending upon the size of the organization, it's massive. I mean, everything from market research to understanding internally your values, your goals, everything. And, essentially, I think what it comes down to is putting together a process for understanding what your brand stands for, how you want to present that brand to the world, and the process you're going to follow to actually go through with presenting that brand to the world. So understanding your brand, defining your brand, and then having a plan for executing on it.
That's very well said.
Thank
Very
you.
well said. Jason.
Yeah, my answer was sort of based off of kind of the organization and planning, even the seasonality, if this brand popularity fluctuates. So in total, like it would come down to a lot of like in-house teamwork and strategy to design the best way to make this product even more popular than it is.
Very good, very good. Melina.
Yeah, so after hearing like the people or what they had to say in my group, I would definitely come down to that. It's kind of how you want to like perceive your brand to the consumers and kind of how you want to like shape and like what your brand stands for.
Very good. And lastly, Hunar.
It's what a brand does to try to create an identity and differentiate itself.
Very good. So kind of right in line with everything you guys were saying. So it is a long-term plan for the development and management of a brand to achieve its specific business goals. It involves creating unique brand identities, positioning in the market, communicating its value to customers through messaging and visual design. And it also helps develop and address the target audiences, competitive landscape, and brand touch points all across all the different channels. The way I kind of try to break that down into a more simpler term is, and you guys said it really well, like brand strategy is the always evolving plan to effectively build, grow, and maintain the mental and physical availability of your brand in the market, right? The place that it being able to maintain the top of mind purchase power with the consumer. So when we start looking at the complexities of the brand strategy, we can look at it like this, and I think this is kind of the easiest way for me to break it down, right? Is you have the foundational aspects of brand strategy, which you may know as the mission, the vision, the purpose, and values. This tends to commit more to the internal strategical narrative of a company. It helps guide employees. It helps guide leadership. It sets the tone for some of the functional aspects of business. There's brand research, which is understanding where your market position is or where you want your market position to be, the customer needs and preferences, so audience research, consumer research, the competitive landscape, and then also industry trends. Another section of brand strategy can boil down to brand positioning. These are discovering what your unique value propositions are as a business, who your target audiences are, and the competitive positioning within that landscape. Brand architecture, which doesn't happen for smaller brands, it can happen at bigger brands, but this is determining how the portfolio of sub-brands works within the larger picture of the big brand. You have brand identity, which is the visual and verbal identity that reflects the brand's recognizable attributes. You have brand presence. This is figuring out exactly where, like, what are the different touch points of where your brand shows up. Things like, websites, social media, how does it look in email? What does it look like in a store? All over the place. So the last two, we have brand management, which are pieces of the company that kind of over time will monitor the health of it, the brand equity, as we would say, and helping make strategic adjustments as you move along. And then lastly, brand measurement, which are tracking metrics and KPIs to help kind of measure the effectiveness of those efforts over time. Does anybody have any questions on this right now before I move on? We good?
Brad, one thing I'd love to say is that if you have a career in marketing, some people have careers in one specific part of this. You could have your entire career just in brand research or brand measurement. So it's a huge, huge industry. And a lot of people sort of follow into it, but they're all interesting careers.
Yeah, brand strategy to me is business strategy. They're intertwined. And just like Eric mentioned, which is actually a great segue to the next piece, are what types of roles exist within those certain functions of brand strategy. Brand foundational work it's usually done, should be done at the beginning of a business creation process. So when you're going through something like creating a business plan, you have to do a lot of the audience research yourself. You have to understand what problems exist, what problems you're trying to solve, and who you're solving it for. You're trying to define a vision of where you want your company to go and how you want it to look internally and externally. So a lot of that stuff happens early on in the business creation process. But once you move into some of those research roles, you can be a brand research analyst, market analyst. You could work with consumer insights and running surveys, competitive intelligence, which is you're just always looking at the competitive landscape, looking at what businesses do well, what they don't do, doing SWOT analysis and stuff like that. More within the actual brand strategy sphere within the marketing side of things, you start to get into roles like brand strategist, brand manager, or marketing directors or product managers. Those types of roles fluctuate in between management, brand management, working with creative teams and brand identity, working with marketing teams and how those strategies are going to show up in the market. And then for the identity side, you have copywriters, you have visual designers, web designers, product designers, and they all can utilize the strategies that you define as part of this process to really create the right type of advertisements and visual assets and messaging that will connect with consumers in different ways. And like someone said, I think it was Melina said it earlier, being able to create a distinction within the competitive landscape at which you operate. Additionally, there's brand directors, there's compliance managers, making sure that everything your brand does has a positive light to it, making sure that your CEOs are staying in line, the messaging and PR and comms that are going out are all messaging towards the same common goal and consistency. And then lastly, you have brand measurement tools, which you could be a data analyst, marketing analyst, or an analytics manager as well. And so there's a ton of different avenues at which you can use brand strategy within a business. And to back up what Eric was saying, those roles, I mean, these are roles you can be in for your entire life, right? And for me, designer, working with copy and advertising, and then becoming a creative director and really trying to understand how to utilize brand strategy in creating more effective marketing campaigns and things like that. So,
Brad, before you move on, can you
yeah.
touch for a sec on, for example, some of these positions are hired inside the corporations, or some are brought from, you know, external agencies. Just what's your point of view there?
There's that endless debate of agency versus in-house, and I think a lot of it is determined by your budget, right? So if you're working with agencies, the company that your companies needs to have a lot larger of a budget. You also need to have more time in order to kind of build these strategies and then execute on those strategies. It's also looking at the capabilities within your own business. And let's take creative, for example. You might have web designers and graphic designers on your team, but they have specific skill sets, and they might not be able to achieve certain aspects of brand strategy that you need them to, or they just might not be skilled enough to output the quality and expertise that you're expecting. So there's times to use an agency, and there's times to continue to build in-house. At MasterClass, we had a very good blend of both. From the creative standpoint, we had assets coming out every single week. We had marketing campaigns every other week. We had class launches every other week. And so there's this constant need for marketing assets and website assets and email assets and all these copywriting for all that stuff. And so those are the tasks that we handled from an internal perspective. We also internally were able to define where we wanted the brand to go visually. And so when we did a rebrand, we worked with an outside agency to get some outside opinions and some different ideas and different viewpoints to do our rebrand, which was just a visual and messaging rebrand. Strategically, nothing changed. So agencies are good for when you're looking for outside advice. I think when people work inside a company, they're very attached to the company, and sometimes that can give you blinders and can create inherent biases towards desiring certain outcomes. And so you want to make sure that you're able to balance that with the right types of strategical thinking from both in-house and external. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Any additional questions in terms of kind of some of the roles within brand, or even the specifics of these different types of departments? All right. So one of
Brad,
the
what
things
has
that,
been
oh, yeah,
what
go
has
for it.
been one of your favorite areas to work in out of the ones shown here?
Let's see. That's a great question. Intuitively, I think I do really love the internal strategies of developing a business. So why does a business make the decisions that it makes? And so really diving into the foundational work, creating visions that people can get attached to and be collaborative with, having a purpose and a mission and values that really drive a type of culture within an organization. The that idea of being a leader and coming up with systems that help kind of organize the chaos, in other words, is pretty fun. So, but beyond that, I do really love the visual and verbal side of telling stories and coming up with ways at which to create distinctive assets that get people's attention. I think I've fallen a little bit out of love with it because of how much I've had to, like, especially working in tech and in the Bay Area, you do so much of it week in, week out, week in, week out, and you're not really able to do your best work. It's kind of like it's more quantity over quality. And so you start to lose that as a creative, you start to lose that desire to, just want to output stuff from a business perspective in order to turn revenue. And you're like, okay, I really wish I could do big campaigns. I have these really good commercial ideas. I have these really good photography directions and ideas that I want to come up with. And when you don't have the time to do that, or a brand management team or brand strategy team that is using sound practices with their creative briefs and things like that, it's tough. Like, the life as a creative is you're almost a service for the rest of the company, and you're doing the bidding of the strategist. And so as a creative, I wanted to be able to sit down and talk about that stuff at the table with them and challenge those ideas and make sure that we're doing things with intention versus doing things with luck. And I think a lot of businesses get in that trap these days where they try to throw shit at a wall to see what sticks versus really diving into the foundational pieces of a business, really understanding the consumer, what types of problems you're trying to solve, and then how to bring that to market in a very distinct way. I don't know. I love that entire piece. So. Does anybody else I haven't asked a lot of you. I know some of you are creatives, some of you are aspiring marketers. Are there any other, within these topics, are there places that you like to be in?
I just want to add something to what you were saying, Brad. I've been a creative director pretty much all my life, and I agree with you. All the creative pieces. How can we change people's perception, from different perspectives? But personally, I think brand measurement is one of the hardest things to do because there's a lot of analytics, there's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of psychology behind it, and that's the kind of thing that admire because I can't do it. And I think it's really important because it gives you a better understanding of where your brand is and if you're doing a good job or not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's one of the things that's tough about being a marketer or a creative is the reality that your job is to make a company money. You know, it's to help drive awareness, acquisition, or retention. And a lot of us, especially nowadays within branding, I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on marketing the purpose or the mission or the values of the company externally to attract a certain type of consumer. And I think that's a conversation for another day. I think that's kind of where we get into the bullshit discussion, right? This idea of, you know, we want to understand the consumer and we want to know where they are and we want to know what problems we're solving for them and how to speak to that. And then also how to use that to create anomalies in the marketing space to get their attention. And a lot of brand strategists these days are having their creative teams and product teams do things that are based off of, let's say, like solving big world problems because they think that people will become brand loyal. And brand loyalty is something that I haven't been able to come to terms with because I don't know if it does exist with a very small number of consumers, but in the grand scheme of things, like you need to, there's lots of market research around this notion that you need to, most of your revenue comes from what they call light buyers. And light buyers are people who don't really care about your values and your purpose and stuff like that. They just, does your product solve a problem? And is it cheap? Is it going to be a way, you know, is it worth my time? Is it worth my money, etc. But there's other kind of strategies going on now, especially within brand, where people are putting much more emphasis on trying to create really loyal emotional connections with consumers. And data shows that it's very expensive to do that, and it hasn't really panned out that way. And so that these are rabbit holes to go down. And I've at the end of the presentation, I will give you guys a reading list that kind of will start you down that path of behavioral studies. And I think that piece, like you said, Geraldo, is really it's really interesting. And I think as creatives, we just have that intuitive sense to understand people's behavior in order to create something that connects with them, either or just elicits a moment that they just stop and look and see your product, right? So all right, for our last breakout, I know some of you are creatives, and I think just being able to think about what we've talked about already and kind of discern a few ways at which how you can utilize brand strategy as a tool to become more successful, right? To become more valuable to the business that you're serving.
It's going so well. People are participating.
Is it? Is it good? Is it good?
Yeah, I feel like the chat's like firing up.
Oh,
I think we do need to watch time though, because it is 7 now.
Yeah, I think, let me see how much I got left. Yeah, I think we're pretty close, so.
Okay.
I'll move through those slides when they come back, but.
Cool.
I'll keep the breakout room short. I can
Right.
close them in like maybe 20 seconds, and then they do that thing where it takes 60 seconds to close. So I'll close them.
How are you feeling about it, Brad?
It's pretty good. I mean, it's hard like not seeing everybody.
Yeah.
It's like I haven't really done a Zoom. I've done Zoom presentations, but it's to small teams where you know everybody.
Yeah, it's like we encourage obviously the like cameras off, but we can't really go and like force someone to do it.
We struggle with it too.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I like that you called on people. I think it's a good way to ask for their insights. All right, breakout rooms close in 15 seconds.
Cool.
Kush, the lady left.
Who was she?
Gosh, I'm sorry, guys. I was cut out in the middle of my sentence.
No
Same
worries.
for me.
There's a few of those. It's fine.
Well, we can start with you in your answer. We'll go from there. Continue.
Me?
Yeah.
I was just talking about, I mean, the brand strategy, it's to me, it's more than a tool. If you don't have a brand strategy, it will be really hard to achieve the goal of creating the brand that you want. You know, because organically, it's not gonna happen. You have to figure it out. And what I was talking about is, you know, at some point you need to understand your why. And going back to Simon Sinek, when he talks about why people buy what they buy, you know, it's when you build that affinity with your brand, because they're different kind of brands. You were talking about the brands that are not insignificant. They just sell a product, and if the product fits or answers a question or solves a problem, people will buy it. But brands like Nike or you know, Coca-Cola or Apple, you know, people buy their stuff because it's part of their own entity, you know. And that's every time that I have talked to a client, they always say, I want to become Nike. He's like, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, as long as you have those millions and millions of dollars that they have spent, you know, the swoosh itself, it's not going to give you that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you said, you know, as I've been diving more and more into brand strategy, right? How much does an emotional connection play into a purchase decision versus the behavioral aspects of a purchase decision? Because they're two different things, right? Where is do people gravitate towards a purchase decision that's more effortless, right? They don't think about it. They have this subconscious perception in their mind about certain types of products, right? And because they know that it gets the job done, and they don't want to think beyond that anymore. And to your point with Nike, it's like, I don't know if anybody really knows what Nike's values are or their messaging beyond just do it, right? But they know that Nike holds this ability to run. They don't need to do any advertising. all they need to do is continue to provide that upper echelon of ego to the top athletes in the world, because that's, for athletes, you've made it when you've signed with Nike and you're getting a $40 million deal, right? So how much of that is actually due to Nike's values? And we knew Nike made all their money in sweatshops and did all this stuff in the early 80s and or 80s and 90s. But like, we still buy from Nike, you know? So how much do the values of a company and its brand truly influence a purchase decision versus how something makes you feel in terms of appealing to those values of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is an additional conversation. So, but it all comes down to what type of business you have, right? Because personal brands do really rely on that connection, right? Especially in niche markets. Like, you are creating your own tribe, and that tribe is going to help you survive through the ups and downs. Now, bigger companies, I think people are more brand fickle, and so they won't hesitate to leave you. So there's that discussion around how much money, or how much of your budget should you be putting into retention versus acquisition of new customers. So all right, I'm gonna keep this rolling. Let's go with one more person who wants to answer this question.
We also have some great feedback in the chat, Brad.
Ariana, would you like to go? I like your answers, so.
Yeah, so I think brand strategy can be used in like different ways, and part of it can also be a great way to like build kind of like relationships with your customers and to show like one of my friends, for example, he's working on like a show reel, and that kind of emphasizes like what the brand is about and what you sort of stand for and sort of like represent as a company, like what you do on a really high level and what you're really good at. And then it also sort of showcases like the customers as well and what they're doing. So that's just like one example of how you can kind of have this customer piece and then also like reinforce your brand.
Very well said. All right, let me move to the next slide. So as I've kind of like come from design and then moved into marketing, and as I grow in this space, there's these two truths that I really am understanding, and like I live by this now, and I'm trying to understand every aspect of this. I don't know why my mouse disappeared on my laptop, but understand as much as you can about the consumer. Businesses live and die off of this, right? Your product, if in order to be successful, it needs to solve a problem, right? And some problems are not as important as others. Like people want their ego stroked. That's something that they need, right? It's not always problems, it's problems, needs, desires, challenges. But then secondly, as a marketer, understand what the business objective is. And so if you're looking at avenues of awareness, how do you create distinction, right? How do you create those anomalies to get people's attention in order to sell product? From the acquisition side, strategically, is the pricing correct? Is the offering correct? Discussions around those different types of pieces, right? So with your role, understanding what those goals are can really help you set the right types of strategies if you're in the strategy space, or the right types of executions if you're in the tactical space. And yeah, this is all important because, like we said earlier, your job is to make a business money. And if you're not, and you're wasting it because you believe that, you know, people might be more emotionally attached to your brand than they actually are, you got to be careful with that stuff, right? So understand and get those ideas of how people feel about your product and try to influence it as much as possible, but make sure that the efforts you're putting in towards the strategies and the tactics are done in the right way. So brand strategy, really, at the end of the day, is how do we develop that top of mind purchase power within the consumer? A really good example of this is liquid death, right? Water is bland. It's not a very exciting product, but we need it. It's essential. And this space has been so boring over the past 10, 15, 20, 30 years. All these brands look the same. They sound the same. They just are, you know, it's water. It's water in a plastic bottle. And so here you had a marketing expert come into that specific space. It's a very competitive space, very crowded, and the price points aren't very good. So in order to do well, you have to move a lot of units. How do you break into that market? And we're going to go back to that distinction, right? Looking at how you create those anomalies in the stores, right? That physical availability. What stores are you in? Where are you showing up? How are you showing up? Are people able to remember your brand because your advertising sticks out? The name itself sticks out. It piques questions. So everything that this brand has been doing to build to get some market cap within the water space is really amazing. Now, hopefully, they're discussing things in strategy to say that once we reach a specific amount of user or a specific amount of consumers in the water space, how are we going to continue to put our brand into different categories to continue to acquire new users? So is liquid death, did they create a trend, and will that trend eventually die off? Or is there strategical decisions going to allow them to move into different spaces to continue their growth as a company and beat the big dogs that have, you know, billion-dollar marketing budgets because they're massive? So what next? So there's definitely a lot more conversations to be had around brand strategy, branding, and how to kind of implement the best practices and how to develop these things for businesses. So right now, one of the best things you could do is ask your company about what work they've done. And, you know, if you're creative, ask for the persona researches and look at the creative briefs and try to understand the goals at which you're creating for. If you're in a more strategical position, working with the business and the leaders of that business to make sure that you're developing product experiences that continue to serve that consumer, but also to attract new consumers. I've put a list here. I didn't have links, but we'll send out a link set to you guys. And I love this book, Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a very good place to start when you're trying to learn how to just dive in to specific specific skills, specific industries. And one of these books on this list has completely changed how I think about branding, and that's How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp. He's the head of the Nuremberg Marketing Institute or something like that in Australia or New Zealand. And they do mass market research on with trying to really unravel what makes a brand successful or not. So these are all good places to start in terms of acquiring certain types of skill sets or diving into the complexities of brand. And so, yeah, hopefully we can continue conversations like this and look at some of the things that I believe are bullshit, which have really come from Byron Sharp's viewpoints. This idea that I really don't think people care that much about your brand, and that brand loyalty is kind of it's not the metric that you really want to be putting your efforts into. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but as marketers, you have to manage a budget, and making sure that that's going in the right place to continue to help your business survive is super important. So, and thank you for taking part in my first presentation. And until next time, stay grand, not bland. And we would love to open up the floor to some Q&A.
I just want to add something to what you said, Brad. First of all, great stuff. Awesome stuff. Thank you very much for being part of this program. Elizabeth and Kushi are doing a great job by bringing people like you to to be part of these workshops. I just want to point out something, because this liquid death it's a really great example of disruption, and disruption in a sense that no one, I mean, if you read the comments, I mean, it's people like, I thought it was beer, or I thought it was liquor. Like, yep. Actually, they took advantage of that, and they had a Super Bowl commercial last year, where they had kids drinking it without saying it was water. And that created, a lot of buzz, and that's what the brand is about. To your point, only time will tell if, this clever way of branding it will allow them, for brand extensions or other products, because, I mean, you already establish yourself as water, that it's, irreverent and out of the ordinary, which is great. So I want to just bring that point. That's totally valid. If you can have something where you can be disruptive, I mean, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Jason has his hand raised.
Oh yeah, Brad, I was wondering, what's one form of branding that has carried from, the past into, our tech-centric world now, like any traditional stuff you find still like very important?
What you mean, like a theory in branding?
Yeah, or best practices. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this idea around differentiation, right? And within business, the blue ocean strategy is a big topic of discussion, right? Like, especially when you create something, like, am I creating something where there's not a lot of competition? But when we look back at successful brands, we start to find out that that longevity happens from their ability to maintain their distinction, not necessarily their differentiation, because water is water, soda is soda, right? Like, there's different taste nuances in certain things, but what gets Coke to stand out, right? What gets Nike to stand out? What gets these brands that have been around for so long, where competitors have tried to come in and take over? What's allowed them to stand out? How do new brands enter a very crowded space and make noise, right? And that's where that distinction comes in. Like, can you separate yourself from the pack, right? And that's that competitive analysis, looking at that landscape, understanding what people are saying, how they're saying, sorry, what businesses are saying, how they're saying it, what are their colors. There's that another example of a rebrand that just happened was with Bugatti, where they switched from their red logo to a blue logo as they kind of want to venture into this new space. And that decision was basically made because there are no competitors in the luxury car space that have blue logos. So it's a lot of it is distinction, right? And distinction at the same time of being able to provide your consumer with value, understanding what that value is. So hopefully that answered it.
Yeah, no, it is impressive. Yeah, how Coke and Nike have been profitable or such for 20, 30 plus years. So yeah.
And they're smart. Like, if they see a brand coming up, I wouldn't be surprised if Coke or Pepsi hasn't tried to purchase Liquid Death for a lot of money already. Because it's competition, and they've got there's a new hot brand in the market. So how do they survive? They go and buy.
Yeah.
So
thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions from anyone? Speak now or forever hold your peace. So.
This was really good. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Oh, Gerardo.
I wanna make a comment. For few years, I was the CCO of a branding agency here in California. That's the reason actually why we moved to California. But they specialize in wines. So what they call branding for wines, it means actually a label design. Yeah. You know, because if you think about the brand for a wine, it's basically the 6x3 of the label. But in that label, you have to put so much there depending on your competitive set. If you want to have it, with a $7 to $12 competitive set, or if you want it in a higher price point. So all of those nuances needs to be very subtle, but people get it without looking at those. I'm talking about, when you're designing a label and then you use embossing or gold foil, or that increases the perception of the brand, and 76% of people buy a wine just because of the label. So it's a really interesting industry where you have to compete with the guys next to you, and you have to break the pattern there, and then you have to stand out from, hundreds of them. And with that in mind, think about also that wine has a personality on its own. Cabernet has a different personality than a blend or any other kind. So you need to be very strategic and very aware of the perception of people in order to create something that stands out. It's a really interesting case. I had a lot of fun working in that space, but it's different than any other industries.
Yeah, it would be awesome to like do this as projects where we pick certain industries and we look at why certain brands stand out and why they don't, right? And wine, it's so tough because you have mass market wine, which I don't think there's enough advertising done in that space to kind of utilize its potential. But wine is also, I mean, it's such a symbol of status too, where it's kind of like the car market. Like you are what you drink, Are you cheap cupcake wine, or are you you know, Stag's Leap and Artemis and all sorts of other nice brands in Napa. So
Absolutely. And we have clients from Constellation Brands creating a new label for Woodridge, for example, which is a 6 million cases per year wine. It's the closest thing to CPGs, and everything that we did has to be tested, and everything has to go in front of people and ask them. And then on the other hand, we had people that own a winery, and they think their wine is the best wine in the world, and they don't care about their audience. It's like, I don't care what they think. Mine is the best wine, and I want the label done like this. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Did Eric, you said Tripharma, or sorry, you said Tripharma. That one's really interesting too, because how much of their success is based off of the abuse of that system versus like how many people actually go into the doctor and they're like, oh, I want Provolax, or like some crazy name that this pill is,
They're also a good example of how a product can have multiple markets that make up the decision to purchase it. So you've got, the doctors who may or may not recommend it. You've got the consumers who have seen some ad or seen something that makes them want it. And then you've got a decision made based on whether insurance companies will pay for it or not. So it's a very complex decision in marketing, and it's also got to be legal. So a lot of it goes into it, as opposed to a wine. I think wine, they know how people buy wine. I mean, somebody walks into a store, looks at a label, likes it, and buys it. I mean, that's basically it. And I think over 50% of the time it will be a woman. So they know, right? And the pharma people do something very similar. They spend a lot of money figuring this out. But it's, when you're buying certain things, it's not just one person who's making the decision. It could be a couple of people.
Yeah. It goes back to when I said in my brand strategy definition, mental and physical availability. So that mental availability is, are you putting your ads in enough places to create that subconscious, like there's very little space. There's very little space for brands in people's heads, like much smaller than they think. And so are you able to consistently get stuff in front of people so that you have that mental availability when that time comes up, but also the physical availability is just as important, right? Like, are you in this store? Are you in that store? Are you seeing this ad on social media? Like the frequency at which like direct response ads, that's a whole other topic of conversation, but I don't think there really ever is a direct response ad. It's the attribution is because of the entire network of that mental and physical availability.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
and they know that. Man.
Yeah.
Well, I think another good thing that came up with this, your presentation and discussion, Brad, is that just, for the externs who are getting into marketing, is just understanding how vast an industry this is. And there's so many different things you can do in it. And a lot of them are really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah. And
keeping in mind the externship, I think that some of the great valuable lessons that we've learned from today Externs, we'd love for you to think about how your company's brand is portrayed in the work that you're doing. So a lot of you are working on social media strategy. Based on what you've learned about branding, how are you going to apply that in the social media strategies that you're executing on, or the brand redesign that you're working on? So hopefully some of the definitions and some of the ideas we've talked about today is something that you'll think about with your group and start applying as you continue on with this program.
And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Like I love talking about this stuff now, and as Elizabeth and Kushi can attest to, I was it definitely I love this. This is a like intuitive space for me, and I truly want to be in it. And so all these questions, these theories, these points of discussion, it's an interesting space. So
well, with that, we'll leave the Zoom open in case you want to stay on and ask a question. But Brad, thank you so much for helping out with today's workshop and leading it. We're so appreciative of your time and all of the energy that you put in to execute on this. Behind the scenes, Kushi and I will tell you that there was a lot of effort put into it. So we hope you found it valuable, and we hope to see you at our next workshop coming up next month.
Thanks, everyone.